Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Village of the Damned, or Village of the Damned, for those of you that go on and speak English throughout your days. So, this movie, of course, is the 1995 version of Village of the Damned, because, of course, we have a black and white version of this movie that you can go on and check out if you eventually want to go ahead and do something like that. My interest in this movie was simply because it was directed by John Carpenter and, of course, has Christopher Reeve and has Mark Hamill. And I was like, heck yeah, as well as a number of other cast members that I've gone on and seen through a cluster of other kind of films. Especially Linda Kozlowski, who I know from Crocodile Dundee, and Kirstie Alley, who, of course, I've known from Cheers or a number of other kind of random things, because eventually she has been usually in a lot of them. So, with that said, even though this does like have a kind of old concept of a horror film, I do really enjoy it. I do like how we, of course, have these kids who are to eventually go on and seem superior to their adults, to the point to them going on and deciding one day to like, oh, we're just gonna all live in a barn and you guys are all gonna send things for us. Because if you don't, we're gonna use our powers against you and kill you all off because we can, and we will. So so yeah, like I thought this movie was fun. And also we have Christopher Reeve that by the end of this movie is to go on and be like ooh, 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 and try to hold back what of course he is hiding by the end of this movie. I enjoy this movie. It's a lot of fun. Even though at some points a lot of people would question that fun. Still, I like this movie. So with that said, teeing it up, what is this movie about? Where can we go on and see this movie? What is the grading of this film? Considering it is a John Carpenter film, and plus it is a lot of fun, I would say that this is a good movie. Uh, Simply because, yeah, like there is something not quite unique about it, but uh, also it's just interesting. It's a really interesting film. So, with that said, right now, currently at the second this recording, there's probably not an easy way to say that you could see Village of the Damned. So I'm going to go on and eventually give you a number of apps you can bootleg your way to hopefully say that you can see this movie for absolutely free. So let's go on and let's go into the first app, which is C Movies app. So that's a letter C. Hopefully you can go on and Google search this and be able to download this app, be able to find out that it's going through an update right now, and it is to have changed its name and stuff like that to Yes Movies, and then you could go on and download that app and be able to see whatever you like. The next app, of course, is to be Fox HD Movies. The logo will say Fox HD Movies, but the title will say Play 1080p HD Movies. And then you could also possibly go on to a Google Play Store and search the word 123 Movies, be able to download that, and be able to hopefully be able to say you could see any number of films. It won't always be perfect that you could see every single thing, but you could see a cluster of decent amount of movies for absolutely free. Then you could also go on to a Google search for that same similar kind of app. You can't find 123 Movies, and go on and search the words TV Crush. Eventually, you'll go on and find that TV Crush had changed its logo and everything like that to HD Movies 123 Movies. Be able to download that app with an HD movies word upon the logo with a king crown off to the side. Go ahead and download that and be able to say you could hopefully see a cluster of movies for absolutely free. So, with that said, teeing it up, what is the Village of the Damned about? So, we go on and find, bizarrely, at one point in this story, a whole entire town is to eventually all pass out at the same miraculous time. And so everybody who is outside the town is very weirded out by all this. And so eventually, when the people within this town start waking up, it's like, okay, like, it seems that everything is back to normal. I don't know what happened there. But then all of a sudden, we start to find out that all the women in the town start to become pregnant. Very unusual. So, all of a sudden, we, of course, have Dr. Susan Werner, who is to be this FBI agent, going into this town, going on and asking the women, it's like, well, hey, you can decide whether or not to keep this baby or not keep it. It's your decision. And it seems that every single one of the women go through with it. So after they go on and give birth to these babies, they start to realize that eventually all of these kids have something special about them, that they are to somehow eventually use this psychic ability to control people, and eventually that leads to friction between a normal human and these glowing-eyed kids, to where if there is to be at any point where these parents are to step out of line, these kids are to go on and take them out. And so, with that said, with their weird, goofy, glowing eyes, that here's the thing that doesn't make sense to me. What is the difference in the color of which that these kids can glow their eyes? What is the difference between their eyes glowing green, red, purple, whatever color that they end up being in this film? Like, I don't quite understand what the color difference means. Like, does it mean, like, the power level of which that they are trying to really use against somebody? Is that the whole thing? Is the eye color change to go on and signify, like, how much power they're putting into hurting somebody or killing someone? Like, that's what I would have to assess or assume. I don't know. I guess that would have to be how we would rationalize it, unless this movie is off of some book where they thoroughly explain that somewhere. I don't know. But with that said, this movie is interesting nonetheless, and so definitely would go on and recommend for people who have the availability to go on and see Village of the Damned to go on and check it out. So with that said, let's go on into that double 5 time territory. Let's go into more specifics about this film, and let's go into spoilers. So let's go out of our way to say that it's about that time yet again to double 5 this bad boy up, because it's about that time to go more specifics about Village of the Damned. Spoiler time, it's about that time we can do spoil this movie. So, in the very beginning of this film, we weirdly have Dr. Alan Chaffee, who, of course, is Christopher Reeve in this movie. And I think I'm just going to call him Alan for the rest of the film, or Dr. Alan, because I don't think I can pronounce Chaffee throughout this film. So, we have Dr. Alan that is to be in his bed with his woman in a loving embrace. And then all of a sudden, Dr. Allen is to hear this whisper within the winds of his home. The winds of his home! Inside of his home, he hears whispers, bizarrely. And so Dr. Allen is to make his way outside his room to eventually try to figure out where the whispers are to, of course, coming from. We, of course, have Alan, who turns to his wife, who of course is uh, Barbara, and asks her like, "Hey, did you hear that whispering?" And she, of course, is like, "No." So we then go on and transition to Frank, who, of course, is sleeping within his bed, and is to go on and talk to Jill. So Jill is to talk to Frank and ask him if he is uh, done with all the stuff that he needed to get done from the night before, because of course they are going on and doing some school fair. So we have both Frank and we have both Jill, who eventually get ready for their day, as I guess Jill is to be this principal of this school. So Frank and Jill are driving on, and we of course have Frank at one point who starts to light up a cigaretta. And so we of course have Jill, who is upset that Frank is going on and lighting a cigarette. And so Jill is trying to get Frank to stop smoking, not driving. And so Frank is to go on and tell Jill, it's like, well, hey, when you decide that you want a kid, I'll decide to stop smoking. So that, I guess, is to be a weird way of which that they go on into this story. So we go on and we have eventually Jill, who is to go on to this school fair, where, of course, Jill is to have a number of groceries and all these kinds of things getting prepared. We have at one point where Reverend George, who is played by Mark Hamill, who is to immediately tell Jill, "Oh my God, we need face paint. We need paint. We need to get this stuff. Oh my God!" So Jill goes on, and of course, to get this paint, and so we have Frank that is to have this item that is going to go into the school fair, and he ends up bumping into Dr. Allen and is to mention to Dr. Allen, it's like, well, hey, like, why, like, are you going to go to the school fair? And we have Dr. Allen that says, no, Frank, I'm going to go on and do some rounds at this hospital. And so like Frank is going on and telling out Dr. Allen, it's like, well, hey, how about you just go on and ditch all that, and you come to the school fair so you can go on and have this like muscle machine, so all the people can see how strong you are. And Dr. Allen is like, no, because I would much rather go on and watch all you other young guys go on and test your strength instead of me. And then it's like, ha 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 ha, because of course Dr. Allen is known for being Superman. And so, of course, the tests of strength would, of course, need to be shown by a man who has previously gone on and done Superman at some point. So, Dr. Allen goes on and leaves town to go to his hospital visit. So, we had Frank, the main reason why he was away from the rest of the school fair was because he had to go on and get a helium tank, because of course he needed it for the school fair, hence why he's separate from the rest of the town and comes into this later. So all of a sudden, when Jill goes on and is to grab this paint that they of course need, all of a sudden she oddly falls over. And then all of a sudden we start to pull back, and a ton of the people within this town are to all be down on the ground because they have all fallen over. They have all bizarrely blacked out or passed out from something so unusual. We go on and have a woman named Mulaney, who is to be down on the ground upon her bathroom with a towel draped over her, luckily enough, right? So we go on and see everyone in the town seemingly passed out. It seems that Frank is to go on and drive his way back into town, and then he passes out and crashes his vehicle into a thing that ends up exploding and killing Frank in the process. So because everything is to go deadly quiet within this town, we all of a sudden have a number of deputies who try to make their way into this town by walking into it, and all of a sudden they end up passing out and falling over. So, wildly now we have a white line drawn within the road, realizing that I guess they had figured out where is the barrier before someone passes out. So we have the sheriff who goes on and is to talk to this FBI agent who shows up, who's Dr. Susan Werner. Werner with a V, as she has to go on and tell us. So Werner is to ask whether or not this town has any kind of certain, like a radioactive plant or certain kind of chemicals or something unusual that could cause any of this. And the sheriff is like, no, we have nowhere near anything like that here, so it doesn't make sense. So we then go on and have them test the theory that maybe this is some chemical somehow that eventually all someone needs to go on and do is put on a gas mask and walk their way through the town. Of course, being tied with a rope. So we go on and have one officer that starts to walk into the town with this gas mask on, and all of a sudden he ends up going on like, plah, he falls over. So they start to realize that it's not some chemical, it's not some gas, it just has to weirdly be somehow this entire town is to somehow have this strange ability to have everyone be passed out all at the same time. And Vernon is to also mention in the later part of the film that this has happened through most of the other towns within this country. So, like, this isn't just this one small town occurrence. It's happening in a lot of locations. So, all of a sudden we start to see these deputies start to wake up, and then all of a sudden a certain number of people within this town start waking up, and then they're like, well, okay, like, is this gonna happen again? Like, are we not safe? Like, what's gonna happen here? But it seems that instead the town focuses on the people who had passed out at the wrong time and had died by accident. And Reverend George is to go on and bury people in bulk, sadly. And so Reverend George is to go on and do sermons for all these people who had died during that whole blackout. So we then go on and have it start to pop up within the town that certain women are to go on and start to show signs of pregnancy, even when it doesn't make sense. We go on, we have Dr. Allen that is seeing his patient, Kali Plum, and so we have Dr. Allen that is telling Kali that she is pregnant. She's like, there's no way. No. Like, if anything, I'm sure I'm just sick. Run the test again. This doesn't make sense. So, because come to find out, Kali is to have a husband who has been gone a year while being in Japan, and there's no way that Ben could find some lovin' with Kali, so there's something fishy going on here. But then all of a sudden, we start to eventually see Dr. Allen realizing that a number of women are starting to show signs of pregnancy, seemingly all around the same time, and it's very unusual. So Dr. Allen starts to go on and is to find Mulaney, the girl who is in the shower, is to also be pregnant. And that also we have Jill, who was Frank's wife, was to also be pregnant. And so Jill was telling Dr. Allen that they had been trying, and I guess maybe this could be Frank's child, or it could be something else completely different. So we have Dr. Allen that is telling Jill that all of these pregnancies had miraculously been all connected to the blackout incident. And there could be a possibility that there could be some unusual link. So we go on and have everyone in the town go into this meeting together. And so Dr. Allen and Barbara are to also find out that they're pregnant. So, like, Dr. Allen is to go on and tell these people, it's like, hey, like, I'm in the same boat as all of you, so I'm going to go on and tell you guys the truth. And so Dr. Allen is to mention that all of these pregnancies had all simultaneously happened at the seemingly the same time, and it doesn't make sense. And so there's somebody who's shouting in the background saying that all these babies are going to be born deformed or something's going to be wrong with them. And Dr. Allen is like, well, like, there's a way to test that, and it doesn't seem that any of these pregnancies seem to be out of the norm. So, like, let's not go on and judge too quickly here. So we go on and have Werner, the FBI agent, come in and is to tell everybody that what she is going to do is for every woman who decides to keep these babies, that she is going to go on and fund every single one of their pregnancies. And it's to give them, I think, like $3,000, and it's to give them like a certain kind of allowance every X number of length of time that they are to have these children. And so one guy is to step up and like, well, wait a minute, like, what if like there are two different families, or what if there's like two different people that have two different kids? And she's to go on and say, it's like, well, then we'll give you $6,000 for each kid. Like, so if like one woman had like a twin, bizarrely, because that could happen, then they'd get $6,000 instead of just $3,000, because that might happen somehow or another. So we go on and have all these women who decide to go on and eventually all be pregnant together at the same time, to eventually just say, hey, yeah, like, we're all going to keep these children and we're all going to do the right thing. And so Dr. Vernon is to say, like, okay, well, all these women are all keeping their children. So we go on and we have Dr. Vernon and we have Dr. Allen that is exchanging books to, of course, have them go on and have them both kind of be more optimistic or more open-minded than they possibly could be. And so Dr. Allen is mentioning about some book to Vernon about how if something is to seem the most impossible, then it may be possible. And I think Vernon is to tell Dr. Allen about some Sherlock Holmes book. And so I guess both of them are exchanging these books that they have read recently to try to accept the strange and unusual, and to go on and try to possibly figure all this out. So We go on, and eventually it leads to all of these women at the same time going on and delivering these children. So, so they all give birth to these children also at the same time, also. So it's like, man, that's kind of crazy. So eventually, what ends up happening is Melanie's child ends up becoming a stillborn, and the child dies. So we have Dr. Susan Vernon, who decides to take the child who had died, and she decides to either herself or a number of other people that doesn't really quite seem to be shown in this movie do tests on the child to eventually see uh, how this kid is to possibly have really been born from this woman. And so we eventually come out to find that this is to have somehow been a extraterrestrial event that was to lead to all these kids becoming alien babies. So all of these kids are all aliens, and eventually Vernon reveals that to Dr. Allen in the later part of the film. So I think that that's kind of interesting. So, because I guess they end up dissecting this child and finding out that the child is actually alien in origins. So that I think is kind of interesting. So anyways, spoilers for we're in spoilers anyways, but it kind of gives up the movie. But still, like, you would think for how like unique these children are, you would think that it would probably wouldn't be like, oh, they just have superpowers now and it's great. Not so much. So we go on into this story and eventually have Reverend George, who asks Vernon what she did with the other child, and Vernon was to go on and say to Reverend George that one of the children was ill, and so she decided to go on and decide to run some tests on the child, of which that we never see again. So Melanie, who was to go on and go through the pregnancy of this child and then lose it, was to then go on and eventually decide to become a drunken alcoholic, to the point of her, in her mind, I guess, deciding to end her own life, which is sad, but that's how the movie just seems to showcase to us when David is to meet with Melanie within this graveyard at some point, where she is offering a child weirdly alcohol for some goofy reason. But anyways, let's tail back here. So excuse me. So we go on and we have all these children who are babies. And so in the beginning stages of this whole thing, we have at one point where Barbara, I guess, is to possibly give her daughter too hot of soup by accident. And so it seems what happens is that Mara, because of her eventually being upset, is to go on and use her green eyes to eventually have and force her mother into putting her own arm into this boiling pot, and she cannot pull her arm back out. So Barbara is going on and just dipping her way into just a really hot pot, and all of a sudden we have Jill and David, who are wanting to go on and meet up with Barbara because, of course, they are really good friends. So all of a sudden, Jill is to notice that Barbara is putting her hand in this hot pot. How many times can I say hot pot right here? I don't know. We'll figure it out. So Jill is to go on and notice what Barbara is doing and realizing how irrational it is. And so Jill is trying to pull Barbara's hand out of this pot that could be hot. So we go on and have Barbara, who is to go to this doctor to then get her hand wrapped up because, of course, she is severely burnt. And so we think that would be like the horrific, just like, okay, that's going to be the worst thing that happens to Barbara, right? That's going to be like the worst, right? Like everything's going to be like peaches and cream after that with Barbara, right? Not so much. So we go on into the story, and so at one point, we also have Barbara that from the power of her daughter, Barbara is to also jump off this ledge upon this kind of hill and end her own life. Where Dr. Allen is to go on and be looking out a window and just see Barbara and just be like, oh, she's out there. And then all of a sudden he goes and takes another double take, and then all of a sudden she disappears. And he's like, oh my god, Barbara! Barbara! And then he realizes that she, of course, is dead, sadly enough. So, a lot of people die in this movie for whatever reason. A lot of people. So, the further and further we go on and have these kids, once they get older, we have them all go on and walk together consistently. Because I guess these are the chosen white-haired kids. So, we go on and have the kids who are walking on to see Dr. Vernon, and they end up talking to her, and they realize that she is eventually not having her mind as open as other people are. And so they're kind of curious what exactly she's hiding because her mind isn't as open as other people. So Vernon is to go on and be like, well, no, I'm not really thinking of anything right now. That's the reason, maybe. Vernon is really hiding the fact that she knows that these kids are alien, and that's what she's hiding within her mind. And she had figured out a way to block them from being able to know that by simply imagining a brick wall or imagining a wave or just having some image within her head to block this. And then eventually Vernon is to exchange that information with Dr. Allen at some point in this movie, to where Dr. Allen is to realize that he can go on and do that same thing, and eventually that helps him towards the end of this film. So, we are to have these kids who are so intelligent, are so smart, that it seems that they can no longer be put into a like it doesn't seem like they can go on and have like the education that a kid their age would normally have. So of course they know what is to, of course, be the answer to everything, because of course anybody who's to teach them anything is to probably already know the answer of any question that they are going to ask them. So we go on and we have Jill, who is the principal of this school, who decides to go on and feels that if no teacher will want to teach these kids, then maybe it is all left to Dr. Allen to teach these kids something. And Dr. Allen is to tell Jill, it's like, what am I going to teach these kids? Like, what am I going to go on and really, like, what can they learn from me that they can't learn from anyone else? and Jill turns, while Dr. Allen is to turn away and walk away, Jill is to mention that she wants him to teach them humanity, to like have empathy or just have some kind of like teach them how it feels to be human. So, and we start to go on and have one of the group who is to start to separate from all the others, and that, of course, is a kid named David. David is to go on and realize that he is to want to search out the one kid who had passed away that was supposed to be coupled with him. And since that kid had died, David is now all alone, and he is a less than just because he's not coupled up with someone. So David is to go through this graveyard to try and find this kid, and he cannot. And so Dr. Allen is also going to Barbara's grave, and so it seems that both David and Dr. Allen have both common ground because they have lost somebody, and both of them are to hold hands. And so Dr. Allen is to realize, like, oh my god, like, David is to be like the one different kid compared to all the others. And we also have Mara that is to notice that David is to also, in the later part of the movie, be different because he is to start to have feelings that are disturbing. So we also the one thing that I also forgot is Ben Glum. Ben Glum, of course, comes back after being a year away from Japan, and is to find out that his wife is pregnant without him, of course, not having the possibility of being pregnant with his wife because he wasn't there. So eventually, Ben is to reject Kali and want to separate from her. But then by the time that eventually the child is now to be close to be born, Ben then decides to go back with Kali and like decide to be a father. So I guess he just needed that time away to just kind of figure things out. So, and eventually he's to go on and try to protect his kid, even when it seems that the kids are to separate from the rest of everyone else, because that eventually is to be a thing that happens in this movie. So we have, of course, Dr. Allen that is to go on and realize that he can teach these kids something. And so he tries to go on and put together this class. And we have Dr. Allen asking one of the kids questions. I believe he looks at Roger. And we, of course, have Mara that answers the question for Roger. And we have Dr. Allen that says to Mara, it's like, well, hey, like, thank you, Mara, for answering the question, but I was looking at Roger and I was asking him what, of course, the answer is. Because Dr. Allen kind of wants to figure out, like, if they really are, like, a one mind about things and kind of see, like, how is it that they can be able to kind of figure things out. He wants to test them. So Dr. Allen goes on and is to want to talk about philosophy, but then all of a sudden we of course have a Dr. Allen who gets pulled into the office. So we all of a sudden have this janitor that I guess is to be a man that does not like these kids. And so this janitor, of course, is to be Carlton. Carlton goes on to go into this room and is to take the end of this broom and start smacking these kids in the face. So all of a sudden, these kids start to all get up from their desks and are to go on to eventually have Carlton walk up this ladder backwards, or maybe they went and reversed the shot, because that would be a really hard shot to even accomplish, but somehow Carlton ended up doing this. So we have Carlton, who ends up getting all the way up onto this roof and is to position this broom in a certain way, and then he falls on top of this car and supposedly, I guess, gets skewered by this brush, but we can easily see that it's probably like underneath his arm or something like that. But so they go on and they find Carlton now dead, and we of course have Dr. Allen that realizes that the kids had gone and done this, that all of these accidental deaths are somehow to be tied to these kids. So he's starting to put the pieces together. So we finally decide to have all these kids who want to go on and all be on their own. Instead of living in their homes, in their houses, instead Mara is to decide and tell Dr. Allen that all the kids are all leaving to go to this barn, and that all of the people in the town are going to pitch in and send them things. And I would just be like, really? Like, okay, like, I guess, like, considering we have to fear you, I guess we have to, like, provide for you at some other location, which doesn't make sense. So we have Dr. Allen, after he goes on and finds out that every single one of these kids are actually aliens, because he finds this out by talking to Dr. Werner, he then is to make his way home to realize that there's so much luggage all over the house, and he's like, what the heck is this? He starts kicking it around. So then he eventually finds out that his daughter is leaving for this barn, and she will go on to ask for things later at some point. So all these kids start to go on to this barn, and we start to have certain parents that will not allow this to happen. We have guys like Ben Glum, who his child is to be one of these alien children, and so Blum wants his kid back home and is to go on and find some of the other children to persuade them to give them back his child. So what ends up happening is some of the kids end up going on to have Ben ram into this massive propane tanker, or propane thing, and then it ends up exploding. Like, I think it's like a God, I want to say it's like a oil or propane kind of just tank of some kind. We'll just say that. So Ben now, of course, to be killed, and so we, after that, start to have people in the town who are starting to go against these children. And we have guys like Reverend George, who is to also put a gun to one of these children, but then all of a sudden the children are to appear behind Reverend George and to start to use their powers to then twist Reverend George to go on and shoot himself in the face with this rifle. So, because Reverend George within his sermons are starting to mention how these kids are to start to be powerful and they might be well beyond God and so on and so forth. And they, like, there's a lot of people that are honestly getting in fear, and Reverend George isn't helping much. So, we start to have people dropping like flies at this point. We then go on and start to send like certain police officers, and we end up sending the military that goes after the village kids. Let's just call them. And so, one by one, we have every single one of these police officers and military guys basically fighting one another and killing all of one another all off. And a crazy action sequence that looks freaking awesome. It's just crazy. We have all these military guys that are just shooting one another because they can't control themselves, and it's sweet. So, we also go on and have the village kids who are to find Dr. Werner, and since they are to notice that this woman was to go on and dissect one of their own, they decide to turn around and start to dissect Dr. Werner and put a scalpel while Dr. Werner is completely awake and stab into her own chest and cut herself open. So, we have to assume that Dr. Werner is dead, obviously. So, Dr. Allen is to go on and have this plan. Because before Dr. Werner was to be killed by the kids, she ends up telling Dr. Allen that there is a possibility that a number of other towns have gone on and been wiped out because the government can't go on and tell the people of the town what they're planning, and eventually the kids are to be smart about it, and so it ends up in an all-out war where eventually like towns are to be wiped out because of this whole event. So a number of towns have all been destroyed simply to try to avoid this threat. So Dr. Allen is to go on and have a plan here, and so Dr. Allen is telling Jill to eventually stay where she is because Dr. Allen is to figure out from Dr. Werner that he can go on and block what his thoughts are, because at some point Dr. Allen was to go on and imagine this wave while he was in class, and Mara was to say, it's like, well, hey, like, why are you going on and imagining this wave? Like, what are you really thinking? And Dr. Allen's like, well, yeah, I guess, like, I can go on and do this and the kids won't even realize. So Dr. Allen goes on and prepares this bomb and goes to class with all these kids. And so we consistently have Dr. Allen that's looking at this clock and is looking at all the kids and getting them all prepared for what they're going to do for class today. So Jill is to go on and break through this door because she was trying to desperately Jill was trying to convince Dr. Allen that David is not the same as all the other kids. That eventually David is to realize what a mistake it is to be like all these others, and he has more feelings and stuff like that. So Jill then goes to try to go on and grab David away from this group, and we of course have all the kids who are backing and forthing between both being able to see David and Jill trying to run away, and also trying to understand what Dr. Allen is thinking in his brain. And so this is going on back and forth. We also, before the kids were to make it to this school, before this whole thing was to be planned out, we also had the whole entire town who had turned into this lynch mob that I believe was to be controlled by Reverend George's wife, who is to go on and have this torch and like, yeah, I'm gonna come after these. We're gonna come after these kids, and by our right hands, we're gonna wipe them all out. So we go on and we have this lynch mob with just torches arrive to try to take down these kids, and all the kids end up using their powers upon these people to burn them all alive, to burn them all as they stand there and roast, because there's nothing they can do. So now, hopefully that I've covered almost everything in this movie, let's get to the end. So we go on, and by the end of this film, we have Dr. Allen, who's going on, and so eventually it seems that the children are imagining some brick wall within Dr. Allen's mind, and they start to peel away and prick away at these bricks to eventually slowly but surely find out that there is a bomb inside this guy's briefcase. But by that time, it is far too late, and the bomb explodes and destroys not only Dr. Allen, but then kills a number of the, of course, superpowered kids, the alien kids. And so eventually we have Jill and we have David who are driving off, and so Jill is to tell David that she's going to go on and drive to anywhere that they don't know them, and eventually hope that they can live on. Funny little anecdote. It's kind of interesting how the kid who ends up playing David in this movie is also, hilariously enough, in the show Terminator Sarah Connor Chronicles, the same kid is to also be John Connor. So, man, is that really interesting how this guy had come on to be like a real important guy after going on and doing all of these films and all these movies, and eventually going on and doing something tied to Terminator, and that's really fascinating. So yeah, like the one kid who ended up getting away eventually became John Connor, and I was like, oh yeah, like, why does this guy look so familiar? And then I realized through the photo, I'm like, oh yeah, like that's why. I think a lot of the characters within this movie eventually went on and like did a lot of well-known things, but heaven forbid I can remember much of anybody besides the key actors here. So with that said, I think I'm going to go on and try to get out of here so I can go on and do another review today. Let me know if there's let me know if there is something that I did forget about, because I'm sure that there probably is a moment of some lapse of judgment or something like that, or I forgot about something. Oh, one thing. There was the one moment where the one kid goes on to the eye doctor, and for some reason, we have this eye doctor who's to look directly into this girl's eyes. And so at one moment, we have this girl who is noticing that the village girl is to start to change colors of her eye while this is all going on. So we have this eye doctor who pours this liquid into this girl's eye, and it looks like it burns the girl's eye so badly that she becomes blind in one eye. And so, because of the doctor's mistake, they then use, or the girl uses her power against this eye doctor to blind the eye doctor and make it so that she can no longer see. Like, I guess, like an eye for an eye, so to speak, but even worse. Like, this girl is to be left completely blind. So there's that for you. That's the one thing that I forgot. But anything else, let me know in the comments below. There might have been a detail that I kind of seemingly forgot about. But anyways, with that said, goodbye, everybody. Bye, buddy.